Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. Today we have part 4 in my Trash to Treasure series, in which I will be upcycling an old light fitting which I found next to my mum's bin. In the first episode I made a toast rack. Then in the second episode I made a hot air balloon lamp. Then in the third episode I made a light shade, and in today's episode I'm going to be making a tabletop using the curved prongs from the light fitting to make barriers and create a pattern with those barriers and fill them up with lots of different textures. So if you would like to see how I made my resin tabletop using pieces from the rusty old light fitting, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Just in case you haven't seen any of the previous episodes, here's a quick recap of what the light fitting looked like and how many pieces I got when I dismantled it. This light fitting was quite an ugly duckling, but once I saw all the different pieces that came from it, it gave me lots of ideas for how to make 4 beautiful swans for my series. Right, let's get on with today's project. Right, here are a selection of the curved prongs which I took from my light fitting. There are some large ones and small ones. They have a bend at the end where they were connected to the fitting, and I cut them off with my Dremel with the grinding tool attachment. After cutting off the bits I didn't want and also cutting some of them to a smaller size, I sprayed them with black spray paint and allowed them to dry. Right then, here we have my silicone tabletop mould from Let's Resin, which is a 20-inch mould. I've made a template to go behind it. It's been separated into 8 sections, which will make it easier for me to place my pieces evenly. And here I've poured on a very thin layer of epoxy resin from Resin Pro. It's transparent resin from Resin Pro, and I'm just spreading it onto the mould in a very thin layer, just enough to cover the surface. And the purpose of this very thin layer is to hold my curved pieces into position, ready for the main part of the project. I'm afraid you're going to see my head quite a lot in this video because the mould is so big, I had to have my camera quite a distance away, and because I'm wearing my full face mask, I can't wear my glasses and I'm very short-sighted, so sometimes I have to put my head quite close to the mould so I can see what I'm doing. That's the only problem with wearing my full face mask. I just can't see very well. So if I wear my glasses in there, they just steam up and then I can't see anything at all. Oh, I'd love to have good eyesight, I really would. But yeah, you will be seeing my head quite a lot. I've cut the bits of footage out where all you can see is my head, because that's not teaching you anything at all, is it, if you can only see my head? Once that thin layer of resin was ready, it was time to add all my pieces for my pattern. I'd already practiced making the pattern before filming, so I knew how many pieces I would need and where they would go. And I'm using the template which I can see through the back of the mould, just to make sure I get everything in the right position. And yeah, it's as simple as that really. I just put everything into place. So I fast forwarded this a little bit because, you know, it did take me a little while to get everything just where I wanted it. And then when I'd got rid of the bubbles with my heat gun, I could just close the box and keep all the dust off there while it cured. Okay, it's time to fill in the sections of my pattern. Now, I decided not to use coloured resin for this, and there are 2 reasons for that. The first reason was that I could tell that the coloured resin would bleed through the areas where the two pieces of metal met each other. They weren't sealed together, so there were gaps, and it could be a bit of a nightmare for me to use coloured resin. The second reason is I don't think the style that I would have got from using the coloured resin would have suited the room that it's going into. I really wanted to add texture instead of colour. Even though there's colour in the textures that I'm using, it was the texture that I wanted over colour, if that makes sense. So anyway, I've added another layer of resin, and I'm just using my hand to move it around to make sure everything is covered. And then I've taken my brown little stones, and I got these from Hobbycraft. And I think the purpose of them is actually for aquariums, but they had all the different colours, and I thought, oh, these could be really useful in resin. So I bought them ages ago. I don't even know if you can still get them. But yeah, I think they're actually stones. They might be made of something else. These ones you're seeing now are stone, definitely stone, the white ones. And it was just a case of spooning them on and spreading them around. I was a bit worried that I was going to run out of these white ones, but I managed it just about. So yeah. It's just a case of filling it all carefully, using my tweezers every time I spill them in the wrong place. And yeah, the next ones I did was glass. I decided to use glass for those long bits, and I had these big chunks. In fact, I didn't actually realise how big they were until I poured them out the tub. I'd never used these before. And so I started to think, hang on a minute, I've got to get my brackets for my legs into this, and if those big chunks are sticking up too high, it's going to cause me problems later on. So I moved those big chunks towards the middle and opened my pot of smaller pieces of glass to fill in the rest. It will all make sense later on. You'll see when I'm adding the legs, you'll know what I'm talking about. Right then, for the final piece in the middle, I decided it needed something special. And I have my shell slices, which are one of my favourite things to use, the abalone style shell slices. I don't know whether you would call it abalone. It's, yeah, I think that is that from a specific shell? I don't know. I love abalone is one of my favourite things. But yeah, these I would think you would call them shell slices, which are coloured, and they're just so beautiful. And I thought that would really add the finishing touch to the middle of my table. And sorry for the blurry bit at the moment. I tried zooming in because otherwise you were just going to see my head and my messy hair. So yeah. I'll just show you a little bit of that because it's so blurry, but it's just simply a case of using my tweezers to make sure it's all covered with the shell slices. And once they were all in position, I left it all until the next day to cure, ready for the next layer. Okay then, with all that detail done, all that was left was to fill it up. And at this stage, I didn't want to completely fill it up. I needed to leave a little bit of space at the top for adding the final layer, which would include the brackets for the legs. So yeah, I was going close to the top, but not up to the top. And I needed to choose a colour. I decided on black, and that will completely change that white bit in the middle. I realised that, the glass bit, because it will show through the glass, and I was really interested to see how that would look. I'm thinking it might look kind of grey when it's finished. I'm hoping it doesn't look too black. I want to still be able to see the texture of the glass, when I demold it. But yeah, it will look completely different to how you've just seen it with that black behind it. But that's what I decided to go for because the legs will be black on the table, and I wanted the sides to be mostly black. And yeah, I thought it would be a good background for any if there's any missing stones in the pattern, to see black through there. I almost did white, but for some reason I decided black would be the colour to go for. And yeah, I realised I needed a bit more, so I went away and mixed some more up and added that there. Actually, later on that night, when it was, just a little bit tacky, I added another layer, another thin layer. I thought it would be better to add a bit more because it was still a bit low in the mould. And yeah, I didn't film that. I just did the same thing again, added a little bit more. Okay, the next day when that was fully cured, it was time to add the brackets for the hairpin legs. I got these legs from Amazon and I really like them because they're so easy when you're doing something like this, because you don't need to use any screws or worry about the screws showing through the other side of the resin piece, because you can just cast them into the resin. And here I'm just showing you how the actual leg piece just fits nicely into the bracket. You just squeeze it and it fits through those holes, and they fold up or down, so if you want to store it away somewhere, it's nice and easy. And I'll put a link in the description for those. Right, unfortunately, when I added the brackets, I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. So I was quite annoyed when I realised. But all I did was I used my hot glue gun and just added a little bit of hot melt glue to the back of the brackets and stuck them into place just to stop them sliding around once I added the resin. And then, as before, I added some more resin, and there's some more resin to come just to fill it up to the top. I needed to be quite careful because I didn't want the level of the resin to go any higher than the bottom of the hole that the legs needed to go through. Otherwise, if those holes were blocked, the legs wouldn't attach. So I was quite careful and made sure it didn't go any further than the base of the hole. So the next morning it was time to take it out of the mould, but first of all I wanted to add the legs. And as I said a moment ago, it's very easy. You just squeeze the hairpin leg together and they slot into position. So the moment I was waiting for, time to get it out of the mould, and I was quite nervous, I've got to say. I was worried about the bit where the glass was and how dark it would be, and I wasn't quite sure when I first saw it, but already it's growing on me. I think it's okay. It's just very different to how it looked when I was adding the glass, because obviously it was all very light, and but yeah, I like it, and I especially like the abalone in the middle. So let's have a look and see it in position in my front room. I think it's just the right size for the space I had, because my room isn't very big and I needed somewhere to put a coffee cup, so it's perfect there. And yeah, I think it looks really good. I love the textured effect from the stones, but the best thing about using stones and glass and things like that, any other additions, is that you're using less resin. And that has to be a bonus with a table this size, because it does use a lot of resin. I don't know exactly how much I used. I know people are going to ask how much resin you need for this mould. I'm not sure. It was a lot. It was a lot, but I didn't keep count, I'm afraid. And to be honest, it wouldn't have made much difference if I had kept count, because you're not likely to be using exactly the same amount of additives as I did. So it all depends on how much stuff you're putting in there. So we've reached the end of the fourth part in the series, the last episode, where I have been upcycling that old light fitting, and you know what? I'm quite proud of myself for making 4 completely different things just from one light fitting. I'm really pleased with the end results of all of them. I really hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, could you please give it a thumbs up, because that helps me a real lot. It gets the video recommended on YouTube, and yeah, that helps me. So yeah, if you haven't already subscribed, that would be brilliant too, if you could do that. And I will see you again next week with something completely different. Bye for now.